So thank you for Convenzis for providing this platform. Good morning. Thank you for attending a conference, so on the brink of festivities and the mayhem it brings about. My name is Leon van der Merwe. I'm joined today by my good friend and Regional Director of the UK and EU operations, Melanie Horn. I hope you find value and insights in our presentation and that you are also in turn able to apply in your organization. Right, so before we dig into the topics for today, here's just a quick synopsis of our company to provide clarity on our reach and our experience in the digital transformation arena. We have offices in Australia, the United Kingdom, Singapore, South Africa, and have around 20,000 active clients in more than 30 countries. Our primary goal is to assist largely governments, banks, financiers, insurance firms transform through digitization and automation of critical business processes. We've been doing this for almost 10 years. And we are a recognized Gartner vendor for alternative licensing options under the enterprise e-signatures. Our core technology is based on cryptography, which forms part of the basis of the eIDAS digital signatures, specializing in workflow automation and digitization. We believe the current status quo in licensing set during COVID-19 by software companies taking advantage of this opportunity to maximize profits through shifty license plans. It's not sustainable in the long run for governments or for large corporations. Our approach to enterprise licensing is disruptive as we continue to challenge the status quo and work with our clients to optimize cost and implement sustainable value across the enterprise. Right, so let's get into it. Although digital transformation is generating new opportunities for governments to transform how they work and to deliver better outcomes for citizens, it also comes at a cost. As demand for public services grows, budgets tighten, and citizens become more empowered, business as usual is not an option for governments. We need to rethink the way services are delivered to the public and harness new technologies to tackle regional, national, and even local issues. New technologies offer potential for governments to accelerate transformation. When used as a strategic tool, it can provide the missing link to help deliver better outcomes for citizens in more sustainable ways. But how do governments overcome the pitfalls when identifying software tools that has often counterproductive outcomes on projects and timelines? We see many digitization projects that started with big ideas to encompass end-to-end digitization, even end-to-end automation, that 3 years down the line had little more than a small percentage implemented because somewhere along the line, the scalability entered the arena and the project hit a brick wall, which is usually the budget. We believe that this can be overcome by implementing and practicing sound cost optimization strategies. So let's have a quicker look or a closer look then at these. So the difference between cost reduction and cost optimization is that cost optimization is a continuous discipline aimed at maximizing value and sustainability. We've been in discussions with more than 10 global banking groups, large financiers, public sector, health, transportation, local governments, agencies we deal with. Although COVID accelerated digital transformation for many when we all scattered to work from home, in hindsight, it did more damage than good. Many of those whom quickly invested in a digitalization or e-signature platform are now reassessing whether they made the right choice. According to Gartner's 2022 report, this seems to be a global occurrence. The issue, we believe, lies in transaction-based billing models that came drifting in with the native cloud offerings. Imagine for a few seconds Microsoft had to charge you £1 every time you produced a Word document. I'm going to say that again. Imagine Microsoft had to charge you £1 every time you produced a Word document, or creating an Excel spreadsheet on Office 365 was a chargeable transaction. This would have had major growth deterrent over the past 10 years, and one can only imagine the dire consequences on progress that this would have had. Yet it seems when it comes to native cloud workflow e-signature solutions, paying between £2 and even £3 per transaction has become the norm. The model promotes unlimited users, so large organizations, government departments can enter into a fairly small plan only to find that user adoption and volume start growing, the plans run out very quickly, and you soon find an entire digitization budget is being consumed by a single tool, often fulfilling only a single purpose. So let's analyze this a little further. We ran a simple comparison over a 5-year period, illustrating the differences between a consumption-based license plan on the left and a true enterprise or a flat rate license model on the right. The data used have identical user adoption over time, which is the blue line, and an identical increase in the volume of transactions, which is the grey line, in both models. The orange line indicates the financial cost effect. The consumption-based model proved more cost-effective during year 1 and 2, while user adoption grew. The consumption model, however, over time, shows a consistent gap between the user volume and cost, where the cost consistently grew as volumes increased. The enterprise model had a higher upfront cost, but better overall cost efficiency over time, showing around 52.5% better cost management over a 5-year period. If user adoption was slower than in the presented models, then the consumption-based license would remain more cost-effective for longer. But if user adoption were quicker, or in use cases where large processes like application forms or approval processes for procurement are automated, then the enterprise model will hit the sweet spot much earlier and larger savings could be realized. But this discussion is not about saving money. It is about optimizing costs, implementing sustainable efficiencies, and giving digital transformation projects more reach and more opportunity to reach target state. So let's then have a quick look at Gartner's view of a strategic cost optimization framework. So on the left, cutting costs is reactionary. It usually happens when your budget is blown or you need budget from the larger project. It's a short-term solution. It's got an immediate effect on cost reduction. Directly below that, taking cost out can be achieved by completely eliminating the cost, but this often at the expense of progress. Rationalizing the cost or renegotiating with existing vendors, which most often means paying less for getting less. In the center, when you talk about cost optimization, it is programmatic, consistent with long-term results in structured improvements. It also sees for an increase in efficiencies, an increase in productivity, and a shift rather than a renegotiate in spend. On the right, the value optimization delivers superior business outcomes as it attracts closer relationships with stakeholders, ongoing business value, and then more measurable results. So let's take a quicker look at how the Gartner model then ties into enterprise-based approach for licensing. Enterprise solutions by design are more conducive to end-to-end digitization with a focus on API-led automation, extending on the workflow functionality of legacy business systems rather than fulfilling a single purpose. It is mostly offered in a scalable private tenant or hybrid cloud solution that considers location requirements in the form of on-premise, private cloud, or private cloud hyperscale data centers for deployments. So let's analyze this a bit further. Looking at a quick analysis, the following can be concluded. So if we look at the consumption-based tools on the left top, let me just get my pointer out here. There we go. We look at the consumption-based tools. These are mostly single or limited in purpose, easy to use, but often at the expense of certain security, higher authentication requirements, as it is more focused on user experience. It is mostly tied to native cloud only, which is very convenient for quick deployment, but often lacks choice when it comes to specific in-country data and residency requirements, found especially within governments. So your enterprise-based tools leans more towards end-to-end digitization of both simple and complex business processes with API-led automation through event orchestration and deep integration with core business systems and other workflow tools that exist in the same ecosystem. This is then tied into private and hybrid cloud tenants that offer more location-based options for compliance with data residency and offer higher levels of security for governments and customers operating in the higher security clusters. Right, so based on this discussion, I'm often asked, set the obvious benefits aside, why will a private or hybrid cloud solution be more cost-effective in the long run than a native cloud or so-called software as a service or a SaaS solution if both solutions effectively are cloud instances? Well, the answer to this question is relatively simple. When you start looking at the nature of each, Most SaaS software companies are essentially internet companies, and much like Netflix uses streaming services, software company uses software tools to sell internet services. Let's use a popular document signing workflow tool as an example. Apart from human resources, the number one largest investment in the company is its network infrastructure. It runs, let's say, 3 or 4 major data centers globally. These data centers are built, like with any cloud service provider, to make money. In essence, whether the data centers are owned or outsourced, the service is quantifiable. Its profit margins are added to the service cost. As document processing, per document, is easily quantifiable, the consumption-based model suits these companies' income models. So, removing the profit component from the hosting component by hosting it direct, whether in private or in public cloud, where you contract directly with a CSP like a Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google, or even a private CSP, you immediately start to optimize cost. So let's look at a simple illustration then of this model. Although we ourselves specialize in B2B enterprise models, we also offer SaaS-based consumption plans. So the costing models I'm about to show you for illustration purposes are then based on some of our own consumption and enterprise models. These models, although simple, rounded, not exhaustive of all factors, are true examples and modeling to give you better insights into the inner workings of how software companies in general model various license plans. Let's start with the SaaS, user-based license model, similarly to what one can buy online from various software vendors. Let's assume that the cost of manufacturing a license evens out to £50 and the cost of hosting a license a further £50. This gives the vendor then a rounded cost of £100 per user license. Adding markup to the license gives it a selling price of £100. Markup is then added to the hosting. This component is really shown as the sum of the selling price or your buying price of £200 is all you will see in the listed end user price. Now, assuming you can host this license direct, the buying price of the license will remain at £100, but contracting directly with a cloud service provider or CSP will give you the same or similar hosting cost than what the vendor has. The net effect equates to a model that is around 25% more cost effective. Now, scaling this to thousands of users could mean millions of pounds. Let's look at a different model. So this time based on consumption rather than user-based, and compare that to a true enterprise license that is directly hosted for the same purpose. Let's start with the SaaS model. Let's assume that the cost of a transaction, which could be a document or a digital envelope or a workflow, is £1. The obvious this obviously also includes then compute layers, document storage, and associated costs. The transaction then receives markup and is sold for £2. There's nothing wrong with this equation. It's good business practice. So one transaction will cost you £2. Basic maths tells you then that 10,000 transactions will cost you £20,000. As user adoption grows, volumes start growing, and as users start hitting the release button more and APIs start transacting, you soon find yourself doing 30,000 transactions a month or a year at a cost of around £60,000 and so on. Next, we modeled a similar solution based on an enterprise self-hosted private tenant license with an enterprise license base cost of around £20,000, which will summons a direct CSP hosting cost of around £5,000. This will equate then to around £25,000. So, to process one transaction will effectively cost you £25,000 compared to the £2 in the SaaS model. Scaling to 10,000 transactions, the enterprise model can process at the same cost of £25,000, which is just shy of the so-called sweet spot, so versus the £20,000 of the SaaS model. Increasing the volume on this model to 30,000 transactions, also considering the relational impact on the hosting cost, the enterprise model presents a cost of around £27,500 versus the £60,000 of the SaaS model. The enterprise model in the higher volume scenario, found mostly at governments and banks, increases the cost of efficiency by around 50%, tying this back then to the 52.5% that I presented in the license analysis sample, showing true bang for your buck in the long run. This by no means mean that there's no place for SaaS consumption-based models. This model has a place in low consumption, medium, small volume business use cases. But based on basic calculations and data from real-world use cases, it simply does not make sense from a long-term sustainability and long-term cost optimization framework perspective. Lastly, let's discuss another question that is often received by our consultants, which come from customers that have embarked on medium to aggressive cloud migration strategies, and how the enterprise model can also fulfill those requirements. I'll try and keep this as non-technical as possible, but let's start off with the basic schematic of a cloud instance. So in this case, we used an in-country or regional Microsoft Azure cloud, but it could be anything. It could be AWS, Google, private CSP, or even then a vendor-operated SaaS cloud. With a standard SaaS model, users consume the shared services in the cloud, like the compute layers, the file stores, and the databases. The major benefit is that the service is fully outsourced. The major drawback, especially looking at it from government requirements, is that the service is fully outsourced. Data control, custom security, custom authentication, and data residency is very limited within this model. Right, so looking at hybrid cloud models, they are essentially private tenants, instances that are segregated from the general cloud, with the software running in either fully managed environments or in environments where the vendor and the customer, or the vendor, the customer, and the CSP share certain management responsibilities. Although these are private tenants, it is still 100% cloud-based deployments, but with the added benefits of deploying it in a data center of your choice. Not only do you get the cost benefits associated with the enterprise license plans, which we've shown, you also have full control over the data and location of the instances. Right, so these private tenants can run on customer domains like solution.gov.uk. It can be fully branded in accordance with corporate identity specifications, logos, fonts, color schemes, etc. to promote trust and adoption with the citizen landing on the platform, as these real-world examples will show you. Right, and then lastly from my side, for those obsessed with security, these type of solutions can run equally as efficient in a demilitarized zone, on-premise, or in a privately managed data center, located, well, virtually anywhere. Right, that's a wrap from my side. I believe we have some time for Q&A.
Hi Leon, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for the presentation. First question, are we okay to get the slides shared with developers after the event?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll send it through for you.
Absolutely brilliant. That's absolutely great. So just as a call to action for delegates, please take a look at your screen right now. The poll is on the screen. I know there's a lot of information shared by Leon there, so please do get involved in that poll to further the conversation with SigniFlow after the conference. But yes, a few quick questions before we move on, please, if you don't mind, Leon. So can you provide what level of security do you offer with the SigniFlow solution?
So the security, or the responsibilities in terms of security, obviously from an information security perspective, are all governed by ISO 27001. However, if you start looking at more on-premise platform as a service or IaaS, the security can be absolutely aligned to any of the government requirement securities. We find throughout different government agencies, there's different levels of requirements. Health has got its own sort of requirements within that. Local might need a little bit less. These security policies can be 100% aligned because the platform is fully configurable to that specific instance. Whereas in SaaS, it's sort of one for all, where in the more of a private tenants environment, the private tenants are fully configurable to comply to whatever the security protocols required are.
Absolutely perfect. Leads quite nicely onto another question we've had through. So, is there a need for any further hardware or software when it comes to implementing it, or is it kind of standalone?
Yeah, so there's no hardware requirements, except if you would like to run a private tenant on-prem, then obviously tin will be required in the form of servers, but it fits nicely into any virtual machine environment, so no additional hardware is necessary. It is backed by a public key infrastructure. This public key infrastructure is outsourced, so we take care of all of that. We do have some requirements within some banks, especially within, for instance, some Islamic banks where it's very closed off environments. We have got within some government printing environments where there's a high security module that is required to be installed on-prem, but that's more driven by customer requirements. It's not a necessity in order to deploy the solution.
Absolutely perfect. And just finally, can you discuss from an implementation perspective, what might that look like for a client? And are they able to deploy SigniFlow on premise, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the choice is endless, and it can go on premise, it can go private cloud, it can go in any public cloud environment, or even private data center CSP environments. The deployment project is usually scoped with the client. If there's no integration, it's a quick deployment. A few days, it's up and running, fully branded towards the company's corporate identity. If there's integration requirements, then we've got middleware layers, APIs, open API layers, API-led automation layers that integrate with the business systems to automate processes like application forms, etc., etc. And these are all usually scoped up.
No, that's great. Well, Leon, it's been an absolute pleasure having you involved. Really appreciate the presentation. We'll get the slides shared for everybody as well. And there's been a few questions about that. So, Leon, thank you again, and a huge thank you to the team over there for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Sean.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you, Leon.